Hey, this is the third video for the ourChecklists help. This one I'm going to look at templates and then data analysis. I'm looking at templates because we need to have a consistent way of defining checklists so that we can do data analysis over them. We really need to compare apples with apples, and the only way to do that is making sure the checklists are defined the same way, so that's where templates come into play. Just a note too on templates, checklists that are defined with a template have very restricted design options on them, just to make sure that they do not stray from the original definition of a checklist, so you can again do data analysis across them. Here we go. In this third video I'm going to have a look at creating templates, and then with those templates I'm going to create multiple checklists, and with those multiple checklists then we can have a deeper dive into the data analytics associated with our checklists. So first I've gone to the checklist that I've been working on. I've moved the status through to completed. I'm happy that this checklist does what I think it should be doing, so I'm going to reuse it for other teams to use in their projects to do checks of their validation process. So what I need to do here is, in the checklist viewer, there's an option up here to create a template from this checklist. Just note you need to be a template manager to be able to do this, so I'll click on that. I'm going to make a new checklist and I'm going to call it CMMI validation val template. The description's okay, so I'm going to create the template. So now we have a template, so we can go over to the templates and have a look at the templates we have available. I can look at my templates and I see I've got two templates available to me. The one I just created, the CMMI validation template, and one called boat prep. So I'm going to use this template here. So the way I use a template, and any user can do this as part of creating a checklist, is go in, they can have a quick look at their template, and then they can use this function up here, create a new checklist from the template. This asks them to do things like change the name. So say I'm going to be working on a project called X Proj, maybe V1.0, and there's going to be a val checklist, so it just gives the checklist that I'm going to create a unique name. Okay, so that looks like a good description of this particular use of the checklist, and I need to assign it to a team, so I'm going to assign it to R&D, and let's create the template. So it flips me over here, so I'm now in the actual checklist, and I can work on this checklist just like I did on the original checklist. I can update information, all sorts of things. Okay, it's a little later and I've now created multiple checklists using that one template. We can have a look at them here, and I'm actually signed in as an administrator because it gives me access to look at checklists across all teams. So I'm going to use this template selector in the checklist search and search on my CMMI validation template. So we'll see all checklists that are created based on that template. And we see there's 5 out there. If I have a look at some of these, I'm going to have a look at this one here that's still in active status. So that's got a score of 0 at the moment because it basically hasn't been filled in. So I'm thinking that's not one we're going to want to include in the search, so I'm going to change this to just look at completed checklists. I'll do the search again. Now we've got the 4 and they're all in completed status, and generally when you're doing data analysis you're going to be interested in completed checklists. It means they've gone through the process and someone's checked that they are completed properly and they're not going to be changed again, so they're good ones for doing data analysis on. So I've got 4 checklists that have been derived from the CMMI validation checklist. So now I can take these search parameters and go over to data visualizations, and the search parameters come along with me. Now when I do a search, it brings up the visualization display, as well as having 3 file downloads available to me. So let's have a look at the visualization display first. So in this case, we see it's just doing a raw count on the number of checklists out there that we're matching that search, and we see, as we're expecting, there's 4 of them, and they're all in the category of CMI dev, which is, as we were expecting, they're all derived from the same checklist template. Let's have a look at it by team, and here we see the counts broken down across the teams, and so we've got 2 in that have been done by the R&D team, and 1 by the sales and E team. And we can also have a look by status again, because they're all in completed status, all 4 in completed status. So let's go back to team, and the other thing we can look at this by is overall score. So we see in this case that based on the average score across all the checklists selected for each team, R&D has a checklist score of 100% overall. E2E team has 70, sales has 55 or so. So this is a good way of just comparing how well teams are completing their checklists by comparing across the teams, the scores across the teams. So this may tell us, hey, we need to work with these 2 teams here to get them to be more effective at completing the checklists. There's not a lot of visualizations available here, but again, this system is open source. This page is a fairly easy one to read for doing visualization. So and the data is presented as a simple collection of objects that will be easy to convert into different visualizations. So if a business has different needs, or someone using this system has different needs, then it's fairly easy to go in and create new visualizations based on other checklist and checklist item data that's in there. Usually what you would do is, until you're sure of what needs you have to be able to do repeatedly, usually you'd use this extracted data initially to do your data analysis. Once you find that there is a good data analysis that's useful to you by doing this manually from this data, that's when you'd probably encode it into a formal visualization in the system. So let's have a look at some of the data that's provided. So there's 3 files provided. There's one that's a JSON file of the checklist and items. So let's have a look at that. If I click on that and open up the JSON file, we see it's as you expect, a JSON file of each checklist, and the checklist items as an array inside each checklist, and all the data's been changed into human readable form anyway, so that it can be used for fairly easy in other programs. So that's the JSON file is probably useful for reading into other computer systems. The other 2 extract is one on checklists and one on checklist items, where it's just straight CSV files. So in the simplest way, you could just say bring down the checklists. It's a CSV file. When I open that, it actually opens it on my machine in Excel. And if you're used to doing data analysis in Excel, this is a good starting point. So again, this is just the checklists, all the information about each checklist, including the score. And you can do things like use the data filter, say, and you might be just interested in a certain team. So let's have a look at our team column. Instead of selecting all, I could just select the R&D team. So just filter it down into the 2 items. So that's one level of analysis you can do. Another thing you can do is do it on checklist items. So let's open that up in Excel. So these are all the items associated with those 4 checklists. And as I showed before, one of the things you do is tag the items with an activity based on what category the checklist falls into. So you see, because we used the template, everything that was a review item has been tagged with the review activity. So if we just want to see what's the overall rating each team gave to their checklists, again, we can go into data and Excel, do a filter, and just filter on, say, the reviews, and we can have a look at the various scores that the teams gave themselves. You could also do this on where there's multiple items that fall into certain areas. So 2 of the checklist items for each of these validation checklists fell under implementation. So again, we could go through here and get the scores and seeing where there's differences between different checklists and how well they did implementation. We can aggregate these scores to have a look over time, how is implementation improving for validation over time. So I can do all those analysis things, and I'll just do one more demonstration how you can use this data in something like Power BI, which is more data analysis tool that we use for big data. Just do the same sort of thing, be able to do analysis on the information that comes out of our checklists. Okay, let's have a look at data analysis using a dedicated data analysis tool. So I'm going to use Power BI from Microsoft. So first thing you want to do is get the data. So I'm going to get it. Let me open this up. I'm going to use that JSON file that I extracted. So I'm going to do a connect. Here's the JSON file. So I'm going to open that. And this takes me into the data import functionality in Power BI. Just a note here, you can create a standard script, so you can use this over and over again, so you don't have to go through this import process every time if you just want to get the same fields and process the data in the same way from the same sort of file. So let's select this. I'm going to change that to a table. Say OK. I'm going to expand that and select the columns I want. I'm not going to select them all just to make it easier to follow, so I'm just going to select the checklist name, the checklist items, probably the team as well, all useful things. So I'm going to say OK, and you'll see this checklist items is something that can be expanded as well. So this is the items associated with that checklist. So again, let's expand to new rows and click on it again to select the items or the columns I want from this item. So again, I'm going to choose item name in this case. I'm going to choose the score, and I think I'll choose the activities as well. And you see here, activities is something worth expanding as well. So I'm just going to get the activity name. The other thing I want to do is rename these just to make them easier to follow in the main Power BI program. So I'm going to rename this one to I'll expand that one. Again, I just want the name of this for the team. So I'm just going to rename this to team. This is the checklist item name, so I'll rename that to looks good. This is the activity, so let's rename that to checklist item activity. And finally, let's rename the score to list. That looks good. So you can see here I can actually take the script, save it, and reuse it on future extracts as well. So let's apply and close. And this has brought the data into Power BI. Now I can look at it in table form. One thing I want to do is make sure that this is numeric, because I want to do aggregation on that. The rest of it looks good. So now I'm going to go back here just to the charting palette, and I'm going to actually just try charting this as clustered column chart. And let's make this a little wider. So checklist name, I think, is what I want for one of the accesses. And I also want to get score information shown in values. And if I click down on that, I can choose how I want to aggregate that value. So maybe average is better to see it averaged across all the items. Other things I can do is just, again, this is all normal data analytics type of things you can do with tools, is I may want to filter. So let's do a filter on checklist item name. I'll just add it to the list of filters here. And instead of getting everything, let's just get the effectiveness. So this just shows you across our 4 projects where we had a validation checklist. 2 of them came in at 100% for the rating, and 2 came in at 25%. And you can do more complicated things here. You can also group by things. Do that by checklist item team. So same sort of view, but now aggregating the values by team. So those are just some of the things you can do with a proper data analysis tool. You can make these charts look a lot better, but again, this is a good way to find out what are useful things to do data analysis on. Trend reporting is frequently something you want to do, so maybe by the completion date to see trends, and maybe the ratings or the overall scores for checklists to make sure they're improving. But you can work out all those sort of things in a tool like this. Once you're satisfied that it's doing the right thing, then you can move that in as a formal visualization back in the ourChecklists application.